All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to, I think, everyone's favorite day, Friday. Certainly my favorite day. If you're in Vancouver, of course, you'll know it's going to be an incredibly hot weekend, so make sure you find out a way to stay cool. Although I know some of you are probably in hot areas of the world as well, but here in Vancouver, it's going to be quite a bit hotter than it normally is. I think, are they still forecasting 40?
Yeah, like he has this 3, 5 degrees or something.
Okay, but it'll feel like
Yeah, or
40 degrees, yeah. Crazy. I know some places in the world are a little more used to 40 than we are, but that's hot for Vancouver.
yeah.
So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, hopefully we'll all make it through the weekend here. Um, but let's say hello. So Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. Ryan's here. Good morning, Ryan. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Reza's here. Good morning, Reza. Basil's here. Good morning to you, sir. Hamad is here. Good morning. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Awais is here. Good morning, Awais. Hassan is here. Hello, Hassan. Good morning to you. And Elizabeth is here as well. Good morning, Elizabeth. So. Yesterday, if I recall correctly, we were talking about women's suffrage, right? And so I wanted to sort of introduce this to you. I wanted to introduce this to you just to kind of provide some background so that we could talk about the ways in which oppression kind of worked against women in sort of fighting for the right to vote here in the US and Canada. So I got you to watch just a little video that gave you some background information because I imagine, most of you didn't really know too much about this topic. And we saw that women were kind of prevented from gaining the right to vote in a number of different ways, right? First of all, it was written right into the law of Canada, right? So it's not as if they forgot to include women, but they specifically said women may not vote, right? There was a lot of pushback from church members, and people were sort of quoting the Bible and saying, no, women's place is in the home, women's place is, to support and obey their husband, the men. The men are really the ones made for the political arena, right? And so we saw that really in Canada, and I don't entirely know if it's the same story in the US or not, unfortunately, but here in Canada it had to do with the First World War, right? And the fact that the government at the time, or our Prime Minister at the time, Robert Borden, kind of needed some votes, right? He needed to be voted back in as Prime Minister, but he also needed to be, he wanted his conscription, his military service plan voted for as well. And so he decided he was going to give voting rights to women who were either participating in the war, mostly as nurses and things like that, or women who had someone overseas, right? So a husband or a brother or a son. And so, those women were, of course, much more likely to support him and his military service thing because, of course, they wanted people to go over to Europe and help out their husbands and brothers and sons, right? And so he made a little bit of a political move there in extending the right to vote to some women, but then he kind of made good of it and he extended it to more. But we also saw that that right to vote wasn't really extended to all women in Canada, right? Really, what we're talking about here is the right to vote was extended to white women, right? And so women of color and Indigenous women, or just people of color and Indigenous people, had to wait quite a bit longer to gain that right for themselves. So again, when we talk about women gaining the right to vote in Canada, we should be aware that not every woman gains it at the same time, and there is a racial element to this story. But so anyway, we watched the video. And I pointed out to you that of course women had a primary role in gaining the right to vote. They had to organize. They had to print up signs and pamphlets, and they were speaking in public and trying to get people, win people to their cause. But of course, we should remember that even though those women worked incredibly hard, they could not really do it alone, unfortunately, right? Because I'm going to sneeze in a second here. Am I? Oh man, that's the worst. You know when you're going to sneeze and then you lose it? Ugh. Okay, that's terrible. All right. So the power to sort of the voting power, or the ability to grant someone the right to vote, wasn't really held by women, right? It was held by men, and so women had to work very hard, but they also had to rely on. Ultimately, they had to rely on men, right? They had to rely on some men to give them a platform to speak. They had to rely on men to kind of introduce these bills into the government to be voted on. And so they couldn't really do this for themselves, right? They had to work very hard, but they had to sort of get men to join in as well, right? To help out. We said that women were kind of one of the a number of things that were sort of opposing women's right to vote had to do with social institutions, right? Because the government, the media, religion, medicine, education, all of these kind of institutions were pushing back and saying, no, women should stay in the home, women should stay out of politics, right? And in some ways that made sense because all of those social institutions were controlled by men, right? And so men were kind of trying to maintain their power, and so they were able to kind of speak out or push back against women asking for the right to vote. And again, they were able to sort of spread that prejudice through society, right? The stereotype that women are kind of weaker or frail or too emotional for politics, or politics is too, there's too much strife and we can't have women in there because it's dangerous for them. Good morning. And so, again, these ideas aren't really true, but men were able to, to spread this prejudice through society. You guys okay? Ben, are you okay?
No, I just get cut cold.
You what?
Yeah.
You what?
Yeah.
She got catcalled.
You got catcalled?
Yeah.
When?
Now.
By whom?
This dude walking was like pussy pussy.
He said that?
Yeah.
Holy cow. That's
Dude.
that's a bit much. This is not the 70s. Ugh. That's gross. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It didn't look like anyone who worked around here.
No.
Okay. Okay.
That'd be much worse.
Okay. Well, I apologize for that. Yeah. That's crappy. What's that?
It's okay, you didn't do it.
I did not. I definitely did not. And there's really nothing I can do about it at the moment, but I'm sorry that happened. When we were talking about that the other day, when we were talking about catcalling and making lewd comments, I honestly thought it didn't happen that much anymore. Like I thought, I knew there was a time where, men felt, very comfortable doing that sort of thing, but I didn't think it was really happening much anymore, but I guess I'm...
Oh, it's pretty common in Singapore actually.
Is it?
Yeah. Like especially at like the clubbing areas.
Okay, well, maybe is that a little different?
I don't think the area matters at all. I think it's just the act.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I never thought about this. Sorry, now we're going on a tangent. Is it different, like, if it's, a night out and, it's like around the clubs and everyone's dressed up and it's like 12 o'clock at night and...
I don't think it's any different at all.
No different?
There's one comment because people are like,
This is before anyone enters the club. It's bad because like it's usually a group of guys.
Oh,
So
okay.
like one will catcall, then like his friends will start like shouting after and stuff.
that's so scary.
Right. So yeah, but when you've got a group of guys and one guy starts it and then everyone else joins in, right? And And of course, for them, there's a lot of safety in numbers.
Yeah,
But
it's disgusting.
well, and the woman will feel even more uncomfortable, right?
Many men don't do it, don't even like see like how wrong is it. It's just like, oh, you're just joking around.
Mm-hmm.
But like as a woman, you get scared, especially at night.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think we've mentioned that a couple times, but that's often what happens when minoritized groups try to point out some element of oppression, right? It's especially when it's comments or microaggressions or things like that. It's like, oh, we're just joking, right? Like why are you so uptight? Just relax, right? That's what you often hear in response, right? So, you know, when
That's like the standard answer when someone gets called out. Oh, it's just a joke, guys.
yeah, right. You sort of invalidate the whole situation, and in doing so, you make, you know, it makes the other person the problem, right? So there's the inappropriate comment. Let's say the woman says, "Hey, that's really inappropriate. Don't say that." And so it's just joking. I'm just joking, right? So now you're the problem, right? You're the one who can't take a joke, right? You can't tell the difference between humor and a real comment, right? So, but yeah, you're right. It gets used very often because it's a very easy kind of way to back out and not take responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, that's super unfortunate. Yeah, I'm apologize for that, but as I say, there are some kind of questionable people hanging around this part of town, so. Yeah. That's not a great way to start a Friday.
No.
What was I talking about?
Oppression.
Okay.
Oppression. You were speaking about politics.
Nice. Okay, so right. So when women were trying to gain the right to vote, it was difficult, right? They had to get the message out, but again, all of society's institutions were kind of working against them, right? And again, if you can have society's institutions working for you, things are much easier, right? But women didn't have this, and again, because men were in control of those institutions, right? So we had scientists kind of supporting the prejudice or supporting the stereotype that, oh yes, women were too frail and too emotional for politics. We had religious leaders saying, no, you know, God has said that women should be in the home, kind of thing, supporting their husbands. Psychiatrists, professors, you know, other government officials, everyone is kind of, you know, there's male police officers arresting protesters and demonstrators, right? So there's all these different social institutions that are kind of pushing back against women, right? And so, you know, when you see this sort of thing happening, it's not just, it's an active situation, right? Because women are, you know, protesting and marching around with signs saying we want the right to vote, but they're not doing it in the absence of pressure, right? There's basically an entire sort of male-based society that is pushing back against it, right? And it takes years and years of campaigning. And here in Canada, it actually takes a little bit of, you know, a political play by Robert Borden to, you know, kind of allow women to vote federally, right? But you do see them winning small victories provincially, right? So they're inching forward, right? They get the right to vote in Manitoba, and then Saskatchewan's like, oh, okay, well, you know, women are voting in Manitoba and the entire province did not collapse, so maybe it's okay, right? And so these little victories kind of allow them to make steps forward, right? But it's a lot of work, right? And it's, I don't know about you, but I think it's kind of shocking today how much work it is, considering that, you know, for us it's a no-brainer, right? It's like, yes, of course, right? Women should vote. Anyone with, you know, kind of the maturity and intellectual capacity should be able to to have their say in an election, right? But again, at the time, it was an object of contention, right? And here you can see, remember back when we were talking about Tess Holliday's Cosmo cover? And I was saying that, you know, people were expressing their prejudice against people who are overweight, and they were expressing it because they felt it was fact, right? That people were overweight because they weren't taking care of themselves, or they were just lazy, and if they would just stop being so lazy, they would look better, right? And so people were expressing that prejudice, and here you see the same thing, right? These men were expressing their prejudices against women, but they were doing so very freely because they thought it was fact, right? They legit thought that women were too frail and too emotional for politics, right? Tell that to Angela Merkel, right? Or, many of the other women who are in politics today. But, but men sort of openly voiced that prejudice because they thought it was fact, right? They honestly believed that was the case. So, yeah, and the other thing I pointed out here in terms of women's suffrage is that, again, all men were really benefiting from this, right? And so oppression in many cases is not it's not a personal thing, right? It's not on a personal level. So I'm sure there were men at the time who believed that women should have the right to vote, but as long as women didn't, those men were benefiting from it anyway, right? And so again, it's not a personal thing. It's the way that society is constructed and the way that it works, okay? I almost talked about some of these. I almost talked about some of them yesterday. I mentioned them earlier when we talked about oppression, that oppression was historical and ideological and institutional and cultural, and I just wanted to explain how that worked right now. So, sorry, my nose is itchy. I said that we have an underrepresentation of government, or women in government, okay? So we'll talk about this a little later with statistics, but when you talk about representation, do you have as much in one group as you do in the larger population, right? So here, sorry, my nose is still itchy. So here in Canada, women make up, I think it's about 52% of the population. So women are slightly in the majority, right? So you would think, or maybe you wouldn't think, but if all things were equal, you would expect that half of the government would be made of women, right? Because, again, half of society is women. You would expect half of the government to be women, give or take. But that's not the case. Does anyone have any idea what the percentage of elected government officials in Canada that are women? How much? Yeah, you're pretty close. I think it's about 20. I think it's about 23 or 24 maybe. It fluctuates, but yeah. So women are pretty solidly underrepresented in government, right? You would think there'd be 50% of them because there's 50% women in Canada. Not the case, right? There's only about 20 to 25. So again, even though women are underrepresented, they are working within a government that was created for and by men, right? So if we elect all women tomorrow, fantastic, but those women are still working within a structure created by and for men, right? And so they can change it, but it takes time, right? And it would probably get a lot of pushback, right? A government entirely made of women would have a rough go of it, right? Because people would, people's biases would kick in, right? People would see the government differently than, there was, I don't know if this is a sexism issue, but in Alberta, where I come from, we had a conservative party in power in the province for like 40 years, okay? Same political party. And we had them in there because Alberta is overall a pretty conservative province, right? And so they always elected conservatives until finally we got kind of a run of kind of bad economic situations and sort of arrogant leaders where Alberta was like, that's it, we're done with these conservatives. And so they elected an NDP government. And so the NDP is kind of out on the left wing, right? So they're a more liberal party than the Liberals are. But that was kind of their only other choice. And for the next 4 years, the Albertans hated that government, and they you know, there was all kinds of bad comments made about them. And to be honest, I think they actually did a pretty good job, that NDP government. But the NDP government was led by a woman, was led by this woman, Rachel Notley. And so, you know, at the time I thought, well, of course Albertans hated their government because they really wanted a conservative government, but they, you know,
What
they...
defines a conservative government?
What's that?
What defines a conservative government?
Well, we talked about that in history, did we not?
Really?
I think so. What defines a conservative government? Oh man. What's that?
What does define a conservative government?
What defines one? Okay, we're way off track now, but I'm gonna allow it. So you've kind of got a left wing and a right wing, right? And people on the right wing are conservative. People on the left wing are liberal. Okay, so far so good. Now I'm not talking about the extreme ends, because the extreme right is like fascism, right? And the extreme left is communism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but
The question I did answer in the
oh
question.
my God. So most people, like if you look at a country like Canada, you'll see that most people are kind of in the middle, right? We don't really have any fascists here. We don't really have any communists here. Everyone's in the middle. So conservative governments are a little on the right, and what they tend to be for, or they tend to be like, is they tend to like small governments. They tend to like lower taxes. They tend to like not really interfering in people's lives very much. They kind of feel that, you know, the government should kind of keep order and keep the peace, and then just like leave the people alone, kind of thing. Often they're very traditionally minded. Okay, so they have a lot of kind of love for their country and want to keep it the way it is. Sometimes they tend to be more religious, but not always. Sometimes, because they want to sort of maintain tradition and sort of keep the country the way it is, sometimes they're less accepting of diversity. So sometimes they're less accepting of immigration or same-sex marriage or things like that. Sometimes, not all the time. So that's kind of the right wing. The left, the people on the left are kind of the opposite, right? So they want a government that's a little more involved in people's lives. They want more social programs. They're okay with higher taxes to pay for all that stuff. They see more that it's the government's job to sort of help take care of the people. But people in the left wing are also more accepting of diversity, right? So they see their country and they love it, but they want to make it better. And so they tend to be more supportive of immigration, same-sex marriage, all that kind of stuff. Not always, but often. So it's kind of like, you know, what kind of parent do you want? The parent that kind of, you know, sets the rules but then kind of leaves you to be sort of independent, or do you want the parent that's always there helping you out with things, right? And so, yeah. So Albertans really want a conservative government, but they couldn't elect them because they wanted to punish them. So they elected the other side. They weren't happy with anything. The left.
No one's happy with the government.
Well, no, they were definitely not happy with her. Although she was left with an economic mess. So that really was not her fault. As it turned out, the province had been making a lot of money off oil. So Alberta's economy runs on oil. But then the price of oil went into
Oh, is this dream right?
the toilet, yeah. And so, and the previous governments had saved nothing. They had saved no money. So, you know, when all the revenues went down, Rachel Notley and her government had like no money to work with, and so they started to like cut things, even though they're.
Oh, that's what pissed people off.
Well, yeah, but they're the kind of government that, you know, that would have wanted to provide more programs, but there was no money. And so they started to cut things, and Albertans didn't like that. But of course, there's no money, right? Like, you know, when you're making bank and the money's coming in, it's a good idea not to spend every paycheck, right? It's a good idea to put money aside, right? Even regular people know this, but the previous governments, when they were making bank, they spent everything, they spent it all. And so when the price of oil bottomed out, suddenly there was no money left and things got hard, right? Hard decisions started to be made. And so, and they're still kind of in that position, to be honest. But we're getting way off track. But I wonder now if it wasn't only the fact that it was a left-wing government that they had elected. I also wonder if it was the fact that Rachel Notley was a woman. Because again, I thought she did a competent job. What's that?
Especially older people will just think, oh, she's a woman, that's why she screwed it up.
She inherited a mess. Like there's nothing she could have done.
But then most people, especially in the world of politics, like just regular people just see it as like in the now, not what happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They just look, oh, it's bad now, I mean this is a bad minister or whatever.
Yeah, no, there's, that province should have been sitting on a mountain of cash, right? Because there was just so much money coming in. But yeah, they spent all of it, and then again, when the dark days come, there's no money left, right? And so, I don't know, but as I say, I didn't think about it at the time, but I wonder now to what degree her identity as a woman had to do with how the public saw her. But
Is there a government that's where majority of them are women?
I don't know about maybe. I have some statistics I'll show you later. Maybe not a majority, but certainly Canada's not doing very well in terms of female representation in government. You would think that we would, right? You would think that Canada would be the kind of country that would have a lot of women in government. It's not true. we do not, for whatever.
New Zealand, where the prime minister is women.
Yeah, and she's people love her,
Yeah.
and she's
They're the only country that handled COVID so well.
she's doing a heck of a good job down there.
Yes.
Yeah, very impressive. What's her name? Jacinda Ardern?
Yeah.
Is that her name? Yeah. She's
The whole world is so famous.
she's crushing it. She's absolutely crushing it. Again, maybe we need more women leaders, right? Okay, so oppression is historical because, again, men have had power for a long time. They've created a government and rules and policies and laws that benefit them and disadvantage women, right? Oppression is ideological. So there are a lot of ideologies that sort of underlie society, right? These are beliefs, right? These are things that society believes to be true. And so they kind of sit under the surface and they inform how we see things, right? And so, again, ideas like meritocracy, right? The idea that if you work hard, you will be successful. The people who are the most successful, they work the hardest, right? And if you're not successful now, you need to work harder, right? That's meritocracy. But is that 100% true? No, right? I think we all kind of intuitively know that some people have it a little easier, right? If you're born into a rich family, if you get certain opportunities that others don't, yeah, you may have to work hard, but there's other elements to that as well, right? Another one here is individualism, the idea that people can do whatever they want, right? They can make whatever choices they want. And that's not true either, right? I didn't wear a dress this morning because that's not really a choice that's open to me, right? Technically it is, but in another way it's not, right? So again, individualism claims that anybody can do whatever they want. That's not true, right? We all have gender roles, we all have expectations, we all have responsibilities, we all have things that kind of constrain our choices, right? So we can't just do anything at any time, right? We have rules to follow. in terms of these ideologies, some of the ideologies that the women were fighting against were probably religious, right? Canada was a much more religious country in the early 1900s than it is now, right? And those religious leaders were saying, no, it's in the Bible, right? That, man is the head of the household, the provider, the person who takes care of political affairs, right? Women are there to support and to care for, right? And so those ideologies kind of helped men to push back against women's right to vote. So ideologies are important for understanding oppression because, again, in a lot of cases they rationalize inequality, right? So here we had an inequality between men and women. Men were voting, women were not. Why is that? Well, because women are not made for the political arena, right? It says so in the science, it says so in the Bible. This is not their place, right? And again, lots of people believe that very strongly, right? Let's go back to Mean Girls for a second. Why do the plastics and the jocks have such high status at the school? Right? Why do they have the most popularity and status and power? Why do they?
Best looking.
Okay, they're the best looking and they're rich and
White.
they're white and maybe the jocks have like sports skills. Maybe they're good at sports or they're good at football. And are those all things that society values? Yes, right? They have things that society values. We often look up to or admire people who are good looking. We look up and admire to people who are rich. We look up to and admire people who are talented, right? Particularly at sports. Sports is especially football. Football is a huge deal in the United States, right? So those two groups have things that society respects, right, and gives status to, right? And we kind of know that. But also what's interesting is that that entire system of the high school with all of its different groups and levels and things like that, it all works without anyone kind of doing anything, right? There's no police going through the high school making sure that the plastics are obeyed and respected, right? You don't need it, right? Because everybody buys into it. Everybody knows that those girls are the queen bees, right? They're high. Didn't Damien say that they're high school royalty? Didn't he say that in the movie? Yeah. And so everybody knows what royalty is. Everybody knows how you treat royalty, and everybody goes along with it. You don't have to enforce it because the ideology, everyone is already bought into it, right? We respect people with, good looks and fashion sense and lots of money and, who are good at football. We respect those people. And so you don't have to force these high school kids to do it. They just do it because they've bought into those ideas as well, right? But imagine a society where, wealth is not respected, right? There are societies and have been societies where, if you want to be respected, if you want to have status and power and people look up to you, you give, you don't keep, right? Indigenous groups here on the Northwest Coast, that's how their cultures worked. If you wanted to be a big, important man, sorry, there were still gender roles. If you wanted to be a big, important man that people looked up to, you gave, right? You gave everything away that you possibly could, all the time. And that's how you got your status. And so Indigenous people looking at someone like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, they'd be disgusted, right? Because having all that wealth and just keeping it is selfish, right? If you want to be respected, sure, acquire the wealth and then give it away, right? And so, yeah, not all societies believe the same thing. Good morning. Okay, we talked about that. We talked about that too. Okay. Oppression is institutional. So again, if you control society's institutions, you can spread your prejudice throughout society, right? right? And you can sort of create society the way that you want it to, be, right? And so here, education is a social institution. And we often, well, not often, but in some of our social studies classes, we will teach you democracy, right? Good morning. We'll teach you how the Canadian democratic system works. Why? Because we want good democratic citizens, right? That institution, the government, wants good democratic citizens. We're not going to teach you how to overthrow a government, or maybe we are. We're not supposed to teach you how to overthrow the government, because that's not what the government wants. The government wants you to be good democratic citizens who know how the system works, and you diligently do your research, and then you go off and vote, right? That's what the government wants you to do. And so then, and you're taught that way, right? These institutions kind of replicate society as it already is.
Or you could just attend a history class.
Or just attend a history class, right? And then your misguided teacher will explain to you how to overthrow your state
Allegedly.
in a few easy steps. There's no allegedly, there's video evidence.
Oh, right.
It's not alleged. There's documented proof on the internet. Okay. Good morning. All right, okay. The other thing I want to point out here about institutions is that they all kind of worked together to benefit men, right? So again, we had doctors, we had religious leaders, we had journalists, we had police officers, we had government officials. Everyone was kind of working together to kind of maintain male power, right? And they weren't doing it, it's not some coordinated plot, right? It's just people working from their socialization, their prejudicial ideas that they have, absorbed, and they're reacting to it, right? They know how society should be, right? They've been socialized. Women are in the home, men are in the political arena, right? And now women want to be in the political arena too? No, right? That violates our socialization. That violates some of the ideologies that we have. It goes against the prejudicial ideas that we have. It goes against the way we were raised, right? It goes against our religion, right? Suddenly all of these things come up for people and they start pushing back against the idea, right? Even though, again, it's not like all the men got together and said, okay, this is what we're going to do, guys. We're going to keep women from voting. Nobody got together to do that. People just kind of instinctively did it, right? Because, again, they'd been socialized a certain way. When this idea came up that violated those teachings, they pushed back, right? They tried to return things to the status quo, right? Return things to the equilibrium, right? It's just like double dipping the chip, right? George double dips the chip. Timmy gets up and says, hey, cut that out. We don't double dip around here, right? And again, it's silly, but it's the same thing, right? People trying to restore order as they see it. Make sense? Did I just compare women's suffrage to like double dipping a chip?
Mm-hmm.
Did it work?
You got the point.
Kind of works? Okay. Hey, I don't rehearse this stuff, right? Right. So oppression is institutional, right? The other thing that's maybe worth pointing out is that women weren't able to use any of society's institution to their benefit, right? Because they didn't have control of it. Imagine if women had control of the media, right? Even if they didn't have control of government, they could use the media to their own benefit, right? They could use it to help broadcast this message that, that women are being denied an important right, right? And in a way, they use the media, right? Because in the video, they said that play that was staged by Nellie McClung and a bunch of other women, that actually had a big reaction, right? A bunch of people saw this play, it got written about in the paper, and then suddenly everyone was talking about this issue, right? So they didn't control media, but once they were kind of able to get people to take notice, then the word got out, right? People started to talk. But again, if you don't control the media, it's hard to sort of use it to your advantage. And again, this is kind of, I guess, a little bit related to the chip thing too, is that oppression is cultural, right? And so we've all been socialized into a culture and a society that tells us that the world is a certain way. This is how things work, right? This is how gender roles work. This is how the world of work operates. This is how families should be. This is what's good to do and bad to do, right? Here's the things you should try to do. Here's the things you should never do, right? If you want to be a good person, do this. If you want to be a bad person, do this, right? And so we all kind of learn these rules. And again, often when we have an inequality within society, there's a lot of justifications and explanations and prejudice that surrounds it, right? And those things keep it there, right? They keep that inequality as it is. But when you try to challenge it, it triggers a bunch of these things, right? It bumps into people's idea of how the world works, and they have a reaction, right? What do you mean? You want to allow two gay men to adopt a child? Right? That bumps into all kinds of different things, right? It bumps into ideas about sexuality, right? About obscenity, about gender roles, about how children should be raised, right? It bumps into religious things if you're a religious person. Yeah, just that one little thing triggers a bunch of issues for some people, right? And again, these things are all critically important, right? Because again, we've all absorbed them, and we will react to them, right? We will react to them, and again, the deeper you go, the more people will have a reaction, right? And since we were talking about double dipping the chip, that's kind of what makes double dipping the chip funny, right? It's a very surface level social norm, right? It's not a big deal. Of course, Timmy has a very strong reaction. That's the humor, right? But again, as you go deeper, a lot of these kind of rules and ideas are unconscious, but when you challenge them, people will have a reaction to them. Okay. Let's see, what did I say here? Oh yeah. So the way that cultures work, when we have one group in power, many cultural teachings will advantage that group. And so here, think about women who do enter politics, right? We have certain ideas, I think, of what political leaders are supposed to be like, or maybe just leaders in general, right? And often I think that if I asked you to picture a politician in your head, you would picture a man, I think, if I just asked you to do it really quick, right? If I asked you to think about, the President of the United States, you would probably picture a man, right? And you would probably do so because all of them have been men, right? Both in real life and I think fictionally. Has anyone seen a movie where they had the President of the United States and it was a woman? Have they made a movie with?
Fiction. But they did it to make fun.
Oh.
Yeah.
Satire, right? Yeah. So, yeah, for President of the United States, if you think of who that is, you always think of a man, right? And again, that's not surprising. They've always been men. Again, both fictional and in real life. And so, for someone like Hillary Clinton, she has a difficult task, right? Because if she's going to run for president, which of course she did, the norms of society are going to privilege a man, right? Because who do we expect to be president? Well, we expect him to be a man, right? We expect him to be an older guy. We expect kind of presidents to be clear and logical and tough and,
Definitely not that.
yeah, it's that kind of person, right? But women, we expect to be a different way in society, right? What do we expect from our women? Well, I think you women mentioned a bunch of the rules for being a woman when we did the little alien exercise, right? You said, women are expected to be a little bit softer, maybe more nurturing, to be more concerned with appearance and fashion and things like that. And those things kind of are at odds with the office of president, right? We don't look to a president to be caring and soft and compassionate, right? At least not usually. And so if Hillary Clinton wants to run for president, what does she have to do? Well, she has to walk the line between the two, right? She has to be kind of masculine enough to be taken seriously as president, right? So she's got to be tough and clear and a strong speaker and, someone who you feel won't get pushed around, right? But at the same time, Hillary has to be a woman, right? Because she is, right? So she's got to be kind of soft enough for people to be able to accept her as a woman. She's got to do both things at the same time, right? And so that's how the norms privilege men in this case. So Donald Trump was privileged because he didn't have to worry about walking any line, right? He was already an old guy, an old white guy in a suit, right? So he's halfway there. He's halfway to president before he even opened his mouth, right? But Hillary has to convince people that she is, yeah, well, not even the better choice, but she has to, convince people that she can actually be manly enough to be president, right? Where Donald Trump doesn't have to do that because he's already a man, so I'm told. Shoot, there was another thing I was going to say. Damn it, I lost it. Yeah, so one of the criticisms of Hillary Clinton after she wasn't elected was that people felt that they had trouble figuring out who she was, right? They had trouble kind of like connecting with her, and sort of, yeah, she just didn't come across on a personal level the way that maybe people wanted her to. But again, I would suggest that that might have been because maybe people were expecting her to be sort of softer, like more womanly than she actually was. Or it could have been the fact that she had to keep kind of going back and forth, right? She had to sort of be masculine enough to be president, but feminine enough to be taken seriously as a woman. And so people had trouble figuring out who she was because she was trying to do two different things at the same time, right? And I'm not really sure if it was either or both of those, but I would suggest that her gender worked against her, right? And probably not in sort of conscious ways, right? I'm sure there were people at home watching the TV saying, she can't be president, she's a woman, right? But I suspect for most people, that wasn't what was happening, right? They were judging her, but they were trying to sort of reconcile this difference of who we think of as the American president and what a woman is, and they were trying to combine those ideas, right? And she was too. She was trying to do both of those things. But again, someone like Donald Trump doesn't have to, right? He's already...
I think Hillary herself was confused at times, like, especially during the debate. I was watching, like the tone was always off.
Sure. Yeah. And
I just found it a bit weird, the way she spoke.
well, and I think part of it was that, right? Is that she's trying to be two things at the same time, because society expects her to, right? And I mean, like, she's a competent woman, right? Like, Barack Obama chose her as Secretary of State and she performed as Secretary of State for years, right? Like, she was a senator before that, I think. Yeah, she was a senator before that. Like, she's got the resume, right? She's got the credentials. She is, worst case scenario, she's a competent president, right? Maybe she doesn't, change the world, but, she keeps the country pointed in the right direction until the next election, right? Contrast that to the insanity that we had to deal with for 4 years under Donald Trump. And it's like, how do you elect him over someone who is, legitimately credible, right? And maybe wouldn't be the best president ever, but probably be just fine, right? But again, she has a disadvantage. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
I just felt like if she just chose to be one thing, one person, one type, then it would have been better for her.
I think so. She has kind of a complicated past, though, with the whole, she's the wife of former President Bill Clinton, and there was a sex scandal going on, and yeah, so she's got.
Monica something,
What's that?
Bill Clinton and Monica something.
Say that again?
The sex scandal.
Yeah.
It was her husband that had it.
Yes. Yeah. So he had sex with one of his interns. He lied to Congress about it, and she stood by him. So she didn't kick him out of the house or divorce him. She stayed and fixed it with him. And so, but she took a lot of, there was a lot of criticism pointed her way too. And interestingly, quite a bit, there was more criticism pointed her way than there was compassion, right? Like, I assume if your husband cheats on you, that's an incredibly hurtful experience, right? And again, a lot of marriages don't survive that, right? And so she found a way to work through it with him and to forgive him, but a lot of which it had to be difficult, especially with news cameras pointed at you all the time. Had to be difficult, but some people like teased her. Why is she staying? He's such a dog. Some people, I don't know. I think she took a lot of criticism for sticking with him, even though it was probably the harder thing to do. The easier thing to do probably would have been to just kick him out and go on with her life, right? But
Isn't that like a cliche?
isn't what?
Isn't it like a cliche, like everyone's life in America right now? Like the wife's husband usually, like the wife marriage is always like the guy cheating on the wife.
Isn't that a cliche that the guy cheating on his wife?
Yeah, and even like her being fine with like she's like a representative, right? So if she did go in power, wouldn't that give a bad example for like the rest? Like saying, oh, this is fine.
Well, I think some people were saying that. Well, some people were claiming that, yes, she was setting a bad example. She had just, forgiven him, and I guess it was just okay for him to do that. And I suspect it is, that was not the case. I think they, again, she was, and this happens a lot with minoritized groups as well, is that she was then called on to answer for her gender, right? So, the thing was, well, is this really a good model for women, that your husband cheated on you and now you're just going to forgive him? So now everyone should forgive him? Whereas nobody looked at Bill and said, hey, Bill, do you think you're being a bad role model for young men when you sleep with your secretary? Do you think that's the message you should be sending to men across the country, you moron? No, nobody said that to him, right? Because again, he's in the dominant group, right? And he kind of gets away with more. Boys will be boys. You know how guys are, blah, blah, blah. So his behavior is kind of excused, whereas she is under more scrutiny. And she was the victim, right? She is the victim here. And, again, some people have infidelity in their marriage. Sometimes it ends the marriage. Sometimes the marriage goes on and it's just hellish. Or sometimes people find a way to fix it, right? And, any of those things are, well, the hell thing I don't think you want to do. But I mean, whether it ends the marriage or whether the people find a way to work through it, that's their choice. And really, it's not really anyone's business, right? It's whether Bill and Hillary choose to patch it up or not, it's just not, yeah, it's not any of our business, right? Bill kind of screwed up in that he made it everyone's business by having an affair with a White House intern, right? So that was stupid. And lying to Congress was wrong. But past that, it's not, his marriage and her marriage is not anyone's business. And so I don't think people get to judge her for either forgiving him or for kicking his ass out of the house, right? Either of those are legitimate choices, but I think she was heavily criticized, not heavily, but she was criticized, and she was the victim, right? Like she was the wrong thing was done to her, but yeah. And then not only does she patch it up with Bill, but she manages to become a senator and then run for the United States presidency, right? She's a tough cookie, Hillary Clinton is, right?
But no one took that into consideration.
But what?
No one took that into consideration.
They did not, right? They had a tough time picturing her in the role. And I mean, I'm not sure she was the strongest candidate they could have come up with, but
She was certainly better than Trump.
I think she would have been just fine.
Yeah.
I think 4 years of Hillary Clinton would have been just fine. Who knows? Maybe she would have been fantastic. But
Maybe she could have finalized the Obamacare as well.
actually, it's interesting because do you remember when we talked about the resume study? We sent out the resumes, and even for the resumes with the black sounding names, even when they increased their credentials, they still didn't get more callbacks than the white names did. And so similarly, I think we almost see the same thing with the Trump-Clinton election, right? Is that she has more experience and better credentials for the US presidency than Donald Trump did, but it still didn't make a difference, right? He still got the callback, even though she had the stronger resume, right? Not fair.
Hopefully that changes too.
What's that?
Hopefully that view will change.
About women in the presidency?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I know there's been talk about Kamala Harris maybe, sort of following Joe Biden, but I guess we'll see. I don't think he'll do a second term. I think he's getting pretty old. Yeah.
I think Trump's going to run again.
I guess he's gonna try. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he'll get distracted with something else.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I don't think we need him back. Okie dokie, guys. Let's take a little break. We're way off track here. Let's take a break and we'll come back, and I just have something very short for you to read, okay? Okie dokie, people. And we're back. So I'm just going to duck out for a quick second here, so I'm going to jump ahead. And what I'll get you to do is I'm going to ask you to read this very short thing called "What Makes Sexism Difficult to See." Again, it's very short. It's only like a small page or two. It's in Microsoft Teams, so I'll just let you. I'll let you read that. I'm just going to pop out for a second, and I'll be right back. Okay? Cool, cool, cool. Okay. Also, I'd like to do a quiz next Friday, or this coming Friday, a week from today. So I'll talk about it when I get back. Just don't let me forget. I just thought I would say it so you can remind me. I'll be right back.
still on the break? Oh, okay. Wait, since he said we can go on the break, has he come back? But, oh, I guess. Okay.
Ready, shreddies? All right. So, this little article has mentioned 3 major things that make sexism difficult to see. What are those things? What's one thing? Yeah. What? You've got to be kidding me. Oh no. Oh no, it didn't go in.
I thought we were still on the break.
It
It's Friday, you're already delayed.
no, it didn't go in because it had a question mark. It had a question mark in the file name, and my Mac is okay with question marks, but Microsoft Teams does not like question marks in file names, so it rejected it. So now it's there. Okay, here's what we'll do. We'll tackle that on Monday, since I've already wasted 10 minutes of time here. We'll tackle that on Monday. So next week is going to be a little weird, right? First of all, it's going to be so hot we'll feel like we're studying on the surface of the sun, so there'll be that. Number 2, we have 3 days, right? We have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday is Canada Day. It's Canada's birthday, right? So we have a day off on Thursday, and then again, I think I'd like to do our fourth quiz on Friday. Okay, so we'll kind of just have 3 days of class. We'll have a break, then we'll have quiz on Friday, and then we're back into yet another weekend. Okay, so I think. Well, let me just see here. I'll confirm it. I'll confirm it in Microsoft Teams because I just want to look through the topics. But last time, there's lots of good stuff to put on this quiz. Where was it now? So it was classes 9 to 14. So I'm going to say this time it might be, I'll confirm this for you. Hang on, 9 to 14. Can't believe that thing didn't go in there. 9 to 14. Maybe like 14 to 24 or something. So we can't quite get all the way through sexism because there's too much of it. So maybe something like that. But I'll look through and I'll try to find a kind of a natural cutoff point, maybe around class 23 or 24. But I'll put it in Microsoft Teams ahead of time so that you know. Same as usual, right? So I'll do the online people first, and then at 9 o'clock we'll do the in-class written one, okay? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I told you that now so that I didn't forget and so that you have lots of time to prepare. But I think I may just pause it there. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss or ask me, talk about? Open agenda. What's good to do on a Sunday? This Sunday, I would say try to stay cool somehow, right? Whether you're go to the mall, take advantage of their air conditioning, go to the beach and stay in the shade and the water. If your house has air conditioning, fantastic.
I'm not allowed to use air conditioning.
You're not allowed to? Why?
Because the whole trip I'm not saying it, because it's too expensive, and the AC is broken. But mainly too expensive.
It's too expensive and it's broken?
Yeah.
Okay.
You couldn't decide which one.
Okay. But clearly you're not allowed to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's unfortunate.
I'm moving on Canada Day.
You're moving on Canada Day?
Yeah.
Yeah, to where?
Another homestay from my
Okay.
just like I'll still figure out finding an apartment,
Okay.
but I think I found one. So,
Yeah. Whereabouts?
it's near Metrotown.
Okay. Good. That's an easy trip here.
Yeah, and it's like I think 10 minutes away from the SkyTrain, so it's not too bad.
Yeah. That's doable. And from Metrotown, it's a short SkyTrain trip here. So.
10-15.
What's that?
It's about 10-15 minutes.
You'll never be late again.
Well, I might always be late because I live so close.
You'll never be late again.
Yeah, I'll never
Right?
be late again.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe that's it for today. Stay cool this weekend. Drink lots of water. Stay hydrated. Don't stay out in the sun. It's gonna be ridiculous. Okay.
What was the preview about?
It'll probably be classes 15 to 25 or so, but I'll put it in Microsoft Teams once I figure out exactly where the line is. Okay. Other things? Questions, comments, concerns? Things you would like to say? What?
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. You too. I'll do my best. We don't have air conditioning either, so we have lots of fans.
But I hope we finish our packet on Saturday, so Sunday's free.
I hope so too. We'll see. There's lots of stuff to do. I got to do some electrical work too, I think. My partner would like a dimmer in her bathroom so that she goes to the bathroom in the middle of the night. She doesn't have to like switch on all the lights and it's incredibly bright. So just a little dimmer switch. So yeah, I'm gonna do that. Maybe tonight I'll do that. Okay, that is it, peoples. Have a nice weekend. Stay cool. I'll see you on Monday morning.
See you in 20.
What's that?
See you in 20.
Yeah.
Oh, will there be a quiz for history again?